I'm going to show you 4 easy ways to blend cheap colouring pencils to create amazing pieces of art. So grab your supplies and let's go. Hey people, it's Temi if you're new here, and yes, today I'll be using the Crayola pencils and I'll be showing you simple 3 colour blends. So for each technique I show you, I'll be using one of these 3 colour sets, and I'm choosing colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel. So I'm doing a red to yellow blend, a yellow to green, and so on, and I think this is a good starting point for beginners when trying to practice blending. The sketchbook I'm using today is from Art Gecko, and it's just a simple white sketchbook, but the paper is quite thick. So I'll link it and all the supplies I used today down below as usual, and you can use any paper you have, but I like this one because it has a slightly rough surface. Okay, so now I'll show you the 4 ways to blend colouring pencils, and I'll show you in order from cheapest to most expensive. And to be honest, all the options are very affordable. The most expensive option is less than $10, but I'll tell you the pros and cons of each and my thoughts about all of them. Before we start, there are a few things you should know. First, make sure your pencils are sharp. This might be a personal preference thing, but depending on what I'm blending, I find that it's easier to do so with a sharper point. The second thing is about how you hold your pencils. For the actual grip of the pencil, do whatever is most comfortable for you. With my nails, this grip works best. But what I want to highlight here is the angle the pencil touches the paper. So I find that a 45-degree-ish angle works best for me. Also, the point you hold the pencil affects the types of strokes. So I hold mine around this point, which is a little lower than midpoint, and I find that it gives me a good amount of control and flexibility. I'm able to create a really nice even layer of colour that's quite light that helps me with the blend. In comparison, when I hold the pencil closer to the tip, I'm able to get more pressure, which is great for the darker strokes or the burnishing layer. And then at the other end of the spectrum, holding it towards the end of the pencil gives very light strokes, but it's harder to control. So when it comes to blending, you want to keep all of this in mind. And let's do some single color blend practices. So do this with me, grab your pencils, and with a single color, start with a light layer. Then apply a little bit more pressure, but don't get to the end of your initial swatch. And then apply another layer with more pressure until you get to an opaque point. So for this one, I've got the solid colour on the left fading lighter and lighter in a smooth gradient to the right. And you can do this and practice this in different directions. So also try colouring horizontally and apply more and more pressure as you layer up. This is a great foundation for learning to blend. If you can do this with one colour, then doing it with 2 colours won't be too difficult. So far we've just done a straight stroke where we've gone from left to right, up to down, or from the diagonals. Another method of blending is by using circular strokes. For this you want to go very lightly, drawing 100 million circles. And you can do the same exact opacity blend by increasing the pressure gradually, but also turn your pencil in your hand ever so often. It's something that I find that I naturally do when I'm colouring, but it can help you get back to the sharpest point on the pencil. Okay, so now that you've got the basics down, it's time to do some actual blending with 3 colours. So for the first blend, I'm going to do a red to yellow blend. And you all know that red and yellow combine to make orange. So I'll have red at one end, yellow at the other, and an orange in the middle. And for this blend, we'll just be doing the layering technique. So I'm applying the red very lightly up until the halfway point. And then I'm doing the same with the yellow at the opposite end. And then I'm going to apply orange in the middle third. And that's 1 layer down. So after this layer is down, you can see where the red starts, where the orange goes, and where the yellow goes. And the entire technique here is just to build up the layers gradually. But you need to consider the transition points. So the transition points are where each colour meets the next one, and you don't want a solid point where they meet. You want to feather it so that you can get a smooth gradient. So layer by layer, you're just going to apply some colour, and by each transition point, you're going to go back and forth with both colours until you can get to a solid block colour at the end. If you want more clarity about this technique, I've got a full in-depth video explaining this technique step by step. And I also show you how to blend multiple colours in that video. So I'll link it on the screen and down below, and you can watch it after you've watched this one. And after we're done, this is what the blend looks like. So for each technique I show, I'm going to do a little drawing of an emoji, and while I'm doing the drawing, I'll tell you some of the pros and cons of the technique. So for the layering technique, the pros are it's the cheapest technique because you don't need any additional supplies. You could do this easily with the colour pencil set you already own, with the colours you already have. Another pro for this technique is that as long as you give it the time it deserves, your blend will come out so smooth and so beautiful. So basically, the more time you give it, the better the result. And the result really ends up stunning. Even while I'm drawing the emoji here, you can see that it's possible to create such a nice, beautiful blend with this technique. Now for the cons. It is so very time consuming, so you're going to have to be very patient with it. Working in light layers gives you the best results, but depending on the size of your piece, this can be very tedious and long, and not everybody has the patience for this. Another con is that depending on the paper surface, it might be hard to do as many layers. So I think it's easier to blend cheap pencils on a semi-textured paper like this one in comparison to the same pencils on smoother paper that has no tooth for each layer to hold on to. If your paper is too smooth, it means you can end up burnishing too quickly and you can't apply any more colour and pencil layers over the top. Cool, so that was the layering technique. So tell me what you think of this blend and this technique down in the comments below. And now we can move on to the next one, which is the white pencil blend. And for this one, I'm going to do a yellow to green blend. So I've got yellow at one extreme and dark green at the other, with a light green in the middle. The first step of this technique is the exact same. So we're just applying a very light layer of the three colours, each occupying a third of the way. And now that we've got the positioning of each colour down, I'm applying a second layer just so I have enough pigment for the white pencil to use to blend the colours. And this is the white pencil I'll be using, so it came in the same Crayola pack of 24, and I'm just colouring over the entire area with the white pencil. It definitely lightens the pigments and it creates a kind of blurred, blended effect. Then we're able to easily layer up with more colour to finish this blend. So a few pros for this technique. It is very quick in comparison to doing the layering technique by itself. So for this blend, I was able to do it in half the time or even less than it took me to do the layering blend. And this is a very good technique if you want to create soft, lighter colours, and I can see this working well for backgrounds. The final pro for this technique is that it's another cheap one where you don't have to spend more money on other supplies because a white pencil comes in most colour pencil packs. And now for the cons. The white pencil in this Crayola set isn't a particularly great one, so it helped a little bit and you can see that it did help with the blend. But a better white pencil is the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil, and I know that buying the whole set is very expensive and I'm not asking you to do that, but you can actually buy the Luminance white pencil on its own. And if you're going to invest in any white pencil, I would definitely say go for the Caran d'Ache one. I'll link it down below. It applies a lot smoother and creates a much nicer blend than using this one, but I just used this one in this video to show you that you can still use it for a blend. The second con is that the colours aren't as vibrant at the end. So if you compare the red to yellow blend at the top against the yellow to green blend, it's clear to see which one gives the more vibrant result. On this same kind of note, if you use this technique for skin blending, your colours might come out very ashy, especially if you're trying to blend darker skin. So I would say stay clear of this technique if you're trying to colour in realistic skin tones. Okay, so now for the third technique, and this is using a blender. So a few companies have their own colourless blenders, but the one I'm using today is the Derwent blender. And for this blend, we're doing a green to blue gradient. starting with a teal kind of green-blue colour at one end and then the two blues. I'm applying 2 layers of colour where I've done the same overlapping kind of technique, and this is to make sure I've got enough pigment down to help the blender do its job. And then I'm just colouring over the entire area with the blender, and it really is just as simple as that. It just helps to quickly get the colours together. And it's just as easy to apply the next layer of colour over the top of the blender. Although I've got other blenders in my collection, I used the Derwent blender today because a few years ago this was my go-to. I would buy and replace the packs back to back. It was actually a big fave of mine. And so for some of the pros, this is a super quick technique and is so easy to get a nice blend. So using this technique or the white pencil technique will work well if you're a beginner. Another pro is that it's a relatively cheap technique. You can get this blender for around $5, which is pretty affordable. And now for the cons. Because of the way the blender works, you can damage the tooth of the paper early, which won't help you if you're trying to layer more colours. And another con is that you might get a similar ashy cast on the drawing depending on how much pigment is down before you use the blender and depending on what you're trying to blend as well. But it's a great technique if you're new to blending altogether. And the final technique is using a solvent. So for this one, I'm going to do a purple to pink blend. And I'm starting in the exact same way, where I'm just applying a light layer of each colour, and I'm also slightly overlapping the colours, which will help the blend. And the 3 colours I'm using are in the same colour family, so I've got the lighter pink at one end, the darker pink in the middle, and the purple at the other end. The solvent I'm using today is the Zest It pencil blend, and I'll link this one down below if you want to grab it. But there are other alternatives you can use, and I'll talk about those in a bit. But I'm just putting some solvent in the lid, and I'll be applying it with a regular paintbrush. The solvent works by breaking down the binding agent that holds the pigment together, and this allows the pigment to freely flow and for the colours to blend. And after you've got the solvent down, it's very easy to apply more layers of the colouring pencils over the top of the solvent. Okay, so for the pros. This technique probably forms the smoothest blend in the quickest time, and that's because the solvent is doing a lot of the work for you. So I'd probably say this is the most stress-free technique for blending. Another pro is that this might be more affordable than you think. You can get this particular Zest It blend that I used in this video for under $10, but there are other alternatives including items you might already have in your house. So some of these alternative solvents include a paint thinner, turpentine, Gamsol, rubbing alcohol, and even baby oil, but not water. Some people ask in some videos, but you can't use water with wax-based pencils. So I haven't tried any of these alternative solvents I just listed, so you need to use them at your own risk and of course try it on scrap paper first, but I've heard that some of these work really well. Now for the cons. You will need to be very careful about which paper you use. So again, I would say test on the paper first because you don't want any buckling or warping from the paper as a result of the solvent. So just for context, the paper I'm using is a 150 GSM acid-free white cartridge paper. Another con is you might have to wait for some dry time. So if you're just doing some blending, you can colour directly on the wet solvent. However, if you wanted to put more details using a fine liner or other marker pens, you might need to wait for the paper to dry before you can continue. This isn't a big problem, and I sometimes use it as time to take a break from the drawing, but it's just something to keep in mind. So there you have it. These are the 4 techniques for easy blending of cheap colouring pencils, and here are my 4 emojis. So which is your favourite? The technique I used today and the one I love the most is the layering technique, especially for my portrait drawings because I just find that it produces the most vibrant, beautiful blends for me, and I always love the results. But saying that, you can always combine a few of these techniques in the same piece. So tell me which technique you're looking forward to trying. And check out this video where I'm using a solvent in practice to draw a strawberry. Or if you're a beginner, take a look at my How to Blend playlist if you want to learn more about blending coloring pencils. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and I will see you on my next one. Goodbye.